G'day, in today's video we're going to be learning how to check for steering play in the front of an old Subie like this. We're also going to be changing the debushing for the steering rack and showing you how to check for steering play in that as well. So the first step obviously is to get the car jacked up and get yourself underneath so that you can have a look at your steering rack ends and your steering rack mount bush, your control arm rear bushes and your ball joints. It's a pretty straightforward process. You're going to need one pry bar and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so the first one we're going to check will be the ball joint here. Now this is pretty straightforward. You get your pry bar, and what you want to do is you want to get that pry bar between your control arm and the steering knuckle here. Then all you're doing, you give it a good wiggle and you just want to check to see if we've got that little bit of play going up and down, click, click, click. You'll feel it, you'll see it as a little click, click on the control arm. In this case we've got none, as much to pry there, no movement, which is nice. We'll move on to the other side. Alright, so we'll just check this side as well. Get your pry bar in there, and you just really take a good close look to see if you can see any movement as you apply pressure. And see absolutely nothing, perfect. We'll go to the next item. Next up is our control arm bushes. Now from factory these bushes are silicone filled, and sometimes when they fail you'll see a little row or some drips of oil here. It'll be coming out from either end. That's just the silicone being split, the rubber being split and the silicone coming out. In this case we've actually got some urethane bushes in here, so they've been replaced already. The other check you can do is you get your pry bar in here and you give a good pry on that. As you can see, as you pry here, there's virtually no movement. It's pretty good. Sometimes when they're really badly split, you pry on here, you'll see the whole bush sort of squeaking in and out. Well, move on to the other side. Sweet. Next up is your inner rack ends. So what we're going to do is we're just going to hold very lightly the inner rack end, and with our other hand grab the tyre, and we just want to wiggle the steering in and out. So we're pushing the tyre in and out like this. What we're looking for is any looseness, and you can feel with your fingers if there's any play in here, and it will feel like a little click clock click clock click clock back and forth. In this case I can feel just a very minute amount, but not enough to be of any concern. Sometimes when they're really bad and you do it, you can hear and you can see a big click, 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 click as you do this, and that's when it's time to replace it. And the last one here is we're checking our steering rack mount bushes. Now this one's dead easy. We can see it, she's pretty broken. It's not always as clear though, and just like when you were checking the rack end, this time you want to grab the steering, the wheels, and you want to push them left and right. Basically steer the car left and right. And what we're going to do is right up in here, you want to be looking at the relationship between the D-mount here and the steering rack itself. Now this can be a very, very minute amount of movement, and even the tiniest bit of movement here can translate to quite a poor feeling in the steering. So we'll just do quickly push left and right and see if we can see any movement in here. There you go, you can see it moving in and out. Half a millimetre. There we go. Alright. To change these isn't too hard. We just take these two bolts out and the other two on the other side, and then we'll wiggle the bush out. There we go. So as you can see that with that bush, it's actually wet with oil, and this is probably the main reason these bushes fail. If you get steering if you get leaks coming out of the steering from the top, or sometimes the rocker cover oil comes in here, or rear main oil comes in here, it just soaks into that bush and it degrades the rubber. So we can just clean it. There's not a whole lot of point if you've got a leak, it's just going to get oily again, but you know, it makes me feel good. Alright, to install the new bush, we just want to spray it with some silicone to get it to slide in nicely. You don't want to use oil for this because the oil will do exactly what it did to the old bush, eat into the rubber or into the urethane and degrade it. Now, silicone's pretty neutral, it's not going to damage the urethane in this case in any way, and it'll just help us slide it in. Now, as you're feeding it in, it helps to just wiggle the rack around and makes it quite a bit easier to push it through. It always is a little bit of a pain though. I want to be applying a pressure up here. There we go. It's pretty obvious once it's slipped in place. Perfect. Alright. Alright, so the torque for these is 59 Newton meters or 43 foot-pounds. Okay, so as you can see, they're pretty straightforward. It just takes a little bit of practice to get a feel for those little things, like feeling for the little click in the steering, feeling for the play in the control arm bushes. The more you do it, the more you'll get a feel of what a good one feels like and what one that is worn out feels like. And eventually you'll be sweet, you'll be able to go under there and oh yeah, that will need to be replaced next service, etc. Pretty straightforward. If you change any of these components, especially the rack ends, you need to get a wheel alignment afterwards. With the steering rack mount bush not required, but your steering wheel may be cocked to the left or cocked to the right, so you may want to get one anyway. It's always worth getting them every couple of 10,000 Ks or so. Oh, hope you enjoyed. Cheers.